Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
All creatures great and small! ¡No me pongo de pie! ¡De rodillas!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Old Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. We're doing bit of a I guess an emergency podcast, you could say. I am getting ready to get on a plane to Spain. So I'm going to be out of commission for at least a day. And in the meantime, I very strongly suspect that the Obed Vargas transfer news will officially break. Joining me to talk about this, my good buddy, Niko Moreno. How you doing, Niko?
Hey, what's going on, Jeremiah? And yeah, let's call it what it is, man. It is an emergency. What we learned this week, or podcast, or whatever you want to call it. I have branded today as Obed Vargas Day. It was going to be all about him, 24/7, at least when it comes to the socials, and rightfully so. We should be through Sounder at Heart, who is the main outlet that has been covering this from end to end. So I just felt like it was necessary for us to be out there, getting in front. And I know people want to hear your takes, Jeremiah. I feel like I'm sick of people with mine, but definitely your takes and maybe some of the things that we've been able to add on. And I say add on because I was on Lovins Corchers like 2 hours ago, and unfortunately for me, as the information has come very slowly, we got a couple more things that we could add to the things.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny because we keep sort of like last night, just to give you a peek behind the curtain, you and I were actually going to record at like 7:00 last night. And we said, well, let's wait because maybe by 11 p.m. it'll be early. It will be the next business day in Madrid. Maybe the news will be official by then. Let's just wait till 11. 11 comes around. There's no announcement. And we're thinking, well, by the time we get up in the morning, this will be official, right? And still here we are. It's now almost 11:00 a.m. on Monday morning. And there's still nothing official, but all the signs point to this deal being done. There's multiple videos of Obed Vargas getting out of his SUV and arriving at the Atletico Madrid offices. There are now pretty substantial rumors about him going on loan once he signs with Atletico Madrid. It looks like he will be staying in La Liga. The favorite seems to be Celta Vigo, but there's some other teams that have been mentioned. And that's sort of where we are. We don't have a lot of hard news. Like, we don't have a transfer fee. We don't have an exact sell-on percentage, although the reporting is that the Sounders are going to retain a significant sell-on percentage. But I think we can talk about this as if it's a done deal, even though we can't get into the details, because everything we're hearing, and I think you've actually been able to confirm that this is a done deal, right?
Yes. As of just minutes ago, I have been able to confirm that the deal is done according to at least one source. It sounds like the contract. It is through 2030, as it has been reported previously. But again, I like to do my own reporting, and unfortunately for us, the information has been very slow, at least for me. Not because I haven't been trying, because I was just talking about it on Lovin's Cultures on Friday after we did our show. I was up till 2 a.m. of Saturday trying to figure something out, because things were starting to connect, and I was starting to get some indications that things were happening. And unfortunately, in the morning of, the big boys got it. And both you and I both knew, I think, that the Fabricios and the Merlos were going to have the inside lane on this, between where the information was coming from, the team that could potentially be getting Obed Vargas, and the fact that we were at a whole different other time zone that was making it very difficult to get certain information. And therefore, they got it first, and, props to them. But now that we have been able to confirm, at least through one source, that this is a done deal, and by the time you put this up, Jeremiah, I'm sure is going to be even more certain. We can talk about, how it all came about, what it means. I'm happy for Obed. I think the biggest piece of news will be where he goes. I know that Celta Vigo has been the trending team, or the one that at least one person has told me that there's absolutely talks to potentially, not through his representation, but throughout the conversations of the negotiation, Celta Vigo has been thrown out as a team that could potentially take him as part of a loan. But talking to some media members that I know in Spain, they were also telling me that Celta Vigo actually is waiting on some movements, specifically to a midfielder from Lazio that they had been talking to, and so that there is a lot of moving parts, and therefore they don't doubt that there is a need, and it would be great to have a guy like Obed Vargas be loaned to Celta Vigo, but that there's nothing confirmed just yet. So where he goes, how much time he plays, how his adaptation process goes. I will tell you this, Jeremiah, that at the very least in the marketing department, it has been beneficial for him when he comes to his ultimate goal of making the Mexican national team roster, because it's been everywhere. People are saying, now that he's in, now that Atletico Madrid has pointed him out as a talent, now all of a sudden he has to be part of the national team. But I still believe that it will all go back to whether or not he's playing minutes. And so it's been a spectacle. It's been all kinds of information about Obed Vargas everywhere. And so, that's kind of part of it.
Yeah, it is interesting how, there was definitely some chatter in the sort of social spaces about Obed over the last year or so, especially in Mexican media. But the volume of chatter has just gone through the roof. I mean, he is being talked about on all the big Mexican football shows. This is like suddenly the it player. And it's funny how just sort of how the pursuit of Obed by Atletico has totally seemingly changed his profile, especially in Mexico, where, I don't know how high profile of a player he was, other than he was the guy who kept turning down Liga MX teams, big Liga MX teams. And it's got to be said, his strategy seems to have paid off. We have talked a lot about this, about how there was some risk associated with basically saying, I only want to go to certain teams. And by all indications, he's going to end up exactly where he wanted to be. He's talked openly about being an Atletico Madrid fan since he was 10 years old. He, when the Sounders drew Atletico in the Club World Cup, he talked about how excited he was, especially to play against El Cholo, which is Simeone's nickname. He has been, after the game, he exchanged jerseys with Antoine Griezmann, and he talked about what a big fan he was. I mean, it's hard to sort of overstate, frankly, how this is playing out exactly the way that he wanted. Like the money might not be, I suspect he's not going to get a huge payday out of all this. I mean, he'll probably get a decent amount of money, but there's probably ways where you could have engineered this where you got more money, but he is exactly where he wants to be. He is exactly in the situation that he wants to be in.
Absolutely. And it's not just about where he's going, and the time that he's going in. But to me, it's ultimately a decision that, in my opinion, the Sounders are part of the move. That they're part of that push to get him to the right place. Right. I have no doubt that his representation group, speaking of Obed Vargas, did a whole lot of moving around, but you cannot at this time and with very little insight tell me that we that the Sounders didn't have a lot of push into their relationship with Atletico Madrid. I mentioned this morning that aside from the videos that we saw between Obed and Antoine Griezmann, there were conversations had between front office members of the Sounders and front office members of Atletico Madrid. So there is a level of credit that I want to give the Sounders for making this deal to this specific team.
Yeah, I think that this is, as big as this is for Obed, I think it's also really big for the Sounders. Now, surely one of the topics of conversation is going to be my suspicion is the transfer fee is going to be somewhere in like the $3 to $5 million range, not the $10 to $15 million range that, sometimes had been thrown around there as possible. But I don't think that should be seen as a mark against the Sounders. Now, people can be frustrated all they want, but the reality was that Obed took control of this transfer. He made it very clear that he was not just willing to go to the highest bidder, that he wanted a certain caliber of team that he wanted to go to. And as a result of that was invariably going to change the fee that he got. And he was even willing, as we've talked about, he was perfectly willing to wait to become a free agent in order to ensure that he was able to go where he wanted to go, or that he gave himself the best chance to go where he wanted to go. And so all of those factors were invariably going to drive down the transfer fee. So I think there's going to probably be a lot of focus on what the transfer fee ends up being. And I guess my point here is I think that's a little missing the mark. I think that's not really understanding
Agreed.
The challenges that the Sounders went into in terms of maximizing their payday. Now, the good news is that it looks like they're going to probably have a big sell-on percentage on the tail end of this. Of course, who knows if Obed just plays out his whole career in Atletico and that ends up being not a big deal. But if they can get $3 to $5 million on the front end of this deal, I think it has to be considered a pretty good bit of business.
And that's the mark, right? I mean, we don't think that this move, and obviously just guessing at this point, will go beyond the 6 million mark. That's as top as I saw it. I actually thought, because it is Atletico and it's not Villarreal or Getafe or one of those smaller teams that maybe need to bring in more to the table than the brand, than the name, than the coach. Like, playing under a guy like Simeone makes a big difference on, how much you're willing to give, because you're like, hey, man, look, I'm going to give you 4 million, but your guy's going to be playing with Simeone and all these great players and all this history, right? Los Colchoneros are well known to be, one of the 3 teams in La Liga that have any chance of doing anything at all every year. So because it is Atletico, I do think that they're probably under that $6 million mark. So my guess is between 4, 5, like you mentioned, maybe more likely 4. But at the same time, because of the time clock that was on, because of the way the negotiations for a potential extension were headed, and the contingency plan that the Sounders had to essentially let go of Obed, I think that the Sounders, and that should get a lot of credit for a masterful move to get everybody a win. Get Obed Vargas a huge win for his career. Get themselves a win by getting a transfer fee, and in addition to that, the market component that it is making a deal with a team like Atletico, which puts the Sounders at this other level where young players are going to look into this deal and say, wow, look, the Sounders got Obed to move on to a team like Atletico. I would love to play for a team like the Sounders. So it does create this optic that both you and I constantly talk about, which is the branding of the Sounders. It's not just an elite team in MLS as a great organization, but now, and I'm not saying they're going to be looked at as a selling team, but as a team that has the ability to sell a player like that.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart podcast network, which now includes No Sarietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible through our paid subscribers. Plans start as low as $30 a year and allow us to remain independent and mostly ad-free. Subscribers get access to all our written and podcast content, including a full-text RSS feed and a mostly ad-free podcast feed that includes every show in one spot. If you really like what we're doing, though, I'd encourage you to sign up at our higher tiers, which include all sorts of various perks. The most popular of those is our members-only Discord, where the real Sounders sickos hang out. I know I've called this group the smartest, funniest, and best-informed Sounders fans in the world, but it's more than the rough equivalent of a Sounders Mensa meeting. Discord is where we make things happen, like for real. You know the promotion the Sounders ran that offered fans the opportunity to trade in their Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock one? That originated in our community. You'll not only be the first to know about stuff, but you also have a semi-direct line to the movers and shakers at the Sounders organization. If you want to be one of the totally normal people who occupy the Sounder at Heart Discord, just become a supporter of Sounder at Heart. Anyway, thanks for listening, and go Durs. No Sarietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Haxon Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Well, I think the other thing you have to consider here is that the number of players who have moved from MLS not into just one of the big 5 European leagues, but one of the big teams in those big European leagues. You know, we're talking about, Atletico Madrid, Chelsea, Bayern Munich, these types of teams, right? And the reality is that there's just not that many examples of players going from MLS to a team of Atletico Madrid's caliber. You can go back to Alphonso Davies, probably the best example. He moved from the Whitecaps to Bayern Munich, and everyone was saying, well, that's fine and good, but he's never actually going to play for Bayern. Now he's probably the best left back in the world. But then there was, less high profile moves. But Matt Miyazaga, for instance, went from New York Red Bulls to Chelsea. And then other than that, I'm really struggling to think of players who moved from MLS to teams of the caliber of Atletico Madrid. Obviously, you just had Alex Freeman move to Villarreal, but Villarreal and Atletico, there's levels of difference in terms of their consistency. Now, Villarreal is a very good team. I don't want to diminish them, but Atletico Madrid tends to play in a different type of pool. They are almost always in contention for a top 3 spot in Spain, and every now and then even contend for a championship. And they've done it over a long period of time. I don't. Maybe I'm talking to myself. Am I underplaying Villarreal in this, or do you think is it fair to say that?
No,
Obed
you're not.
Immediately...
No, you said it correctly. Don't doubt yourself, baby. No, that's absolutely true. Yeah, there are tiers, and tiers go depending on the league. And yeah, right. Villarreal is not in that level of top tier teams. I mean, it's as simple as that. They're a good quality club, and it is great to get to a team like that, a team like Sevilla. That's also another very interesting team many of times. But at the same time, they're just not in that level. I guess, a guy like John Hader Duran going to Aston Villa would be another one that was decent, but that's another one that they're not at that top tier of the Chelseas and the Manchester Cities and the Manchester Uniteds. If I'm not mistaken, didn't Zach Stefano so kind of went to Chelsea, but never
he
played
went to
for
Manchester
Chelsea.
City. He went to Manchester City. And Gaga Salina went to Chelsea. So there are, there's definitely a few examples. Obviously, we're totally skipping over Kevin Sullivan going to Manchester City as well. But again, the number of players who have made moves like this is really, really small. And it's usually not for the biggest fee. Alphonso Davies is, again, maybe the outlier and all that. But most of these players move to bigger teams sort of as a, like on a diminished fee, like what is happening here with Obed Vargas. And I have to say, as soon as Atletico Madrid became interested in Vargas, the Sounders' ability to negotiate probably went from, a little bit to almost nothing, because there is no way that Obed Vargas was going to let the Sounders get in the way of him going to Atletico, right? Like that. We have not done, at least I have not done any reporting specifically on that, but I can only imagine what his, the Sounders' position once Atletico Madrid is calling up. It's like, no. We're working this out.
Absolutely. And this happened and developed extremely fast. I mean, this was a matter of days that they got everything wrapped up and together. Now, the interest from Atletico Madrid, we had reported before on it. I mean, they liked the player, they understood it, but there's a difference between being interested in a player and having an offer on the table. And as we said on Friday in our show, as of the day before and a couple of days before, there was nothing on the table. There was literally no true offer on the table. So this happened very quickly. I do think that it was a moment where all of it was starting to link up, and then all of a sudden things are moving and you're getting guys going, and it gets done. So it does talk about the desire that Atletico de Madrid had at an Obed, and to what we just talked about, a lot of big clubs do this sort of thing. They'll get a prospect, they'll bring him on, and because a lot of times there isn't any room in those main rosters, they'll loan that player out, and it is up to the player to perform in those other places and make their case to go back to the team. So I have all the confidence in the world that Obed Vargas, regardless of whatever team he's loaned to, is going to perform, is going to get minutes, it's going to fit in well with the league, because I think La Liga fits very well to his skill set. And this is something that I've even said about Christian Roldan at one point in his career.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, I have a high confidence level that happens, but it's not a guaranteed. I'll tell you that. I've seen prospects, specifically from Colombia, go to teams like Manchester City and then be loaned out to another team and never make it to that squad. And we just talked about Zach Stefan, and we just talked about other players that they seem to be a prospect, but they never make it. So that part still needs to be determined and see how that works for Obed. I think that he has all of the quality in the world to do so. But it's going to be interesting how he plays out and how much time he does spend in Atletico Madrid. And another thing that could happen is that team decides to keep him.
Yeah, well, I just want to interject here. Literally, since we started recording, all of a sudden there's all this reporting that he's staying with Atletico, that he's actually going to go there and stay with Atletico, which is like literally like these like the timestamps on these stories are literally these posts are like since we started recording. But yeah,
that's because the window's getting ready to close.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. And that's probably a big part of it. But yeah, I mean and it'll be interesting. I think now what becomes interesting, is how this impacts his ability to get into the World Cup. Now, one of the things that we've heard, or one of the things that's been reported, is that Mexico is interested in Obed more for his future potential than they are for his contributions at this World Cup. So maybe just being with Atletico is enough to get him into the World Cup squad. But I can see how maybe this does have some impact on that, because if I don't know, Tim Foss, I got to say, has been pretty consistent in his belief that just looking at Atletico's roster, he thought there was a good chance that he might stay there because they don't have quite as much depth as it may seem. But it's got to be like, to me, it's just an uphill battle for a guy, a 20-year-old midfielder coming from MLS, to come into a club like Atletico at mid-season and get minutes. I certainly hope that he can do that, because I am going to be very intrigued. But I don't know. What do you take from that it looks like he's going to stay? You think it's just a matter of time, that time sort of ran out on it?
Yes, I do. I absolutely think that is a matter of not finding a suitor right off the bat. As I mentioned, there was question marks about Celta Vigo. Getafe was also in the conversation, but with the amount of time and then what that loan would look like, making those calls, I mean, it does take a lot of effort to get something in line. I would disagree with the fact that there isn't enough of a of depth there for Atletico de Madrid, but I mean, sure. I mean, I do I believe that he could go in here and get some minutes, in terms of being a rotational player around Johnny Cardoso or around Barrios or around Koke, who's on his goodbye tour. I mean, maybe, but Atletico Madrid just paid 30 million for Cardoso, and Koke is still a guy that you want in the big moments at 34 years old. You saw him playing here in the Club World Cup, and he just has a different level of pedigree. And Barrios is a guy that Simeone likes a whole lot. So there is some players that have already been consistent for it, but we'll see. I mean, maybe he gets there and he can get some minutes in press and pick up a spot.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty big development. If he's going to stay at the Atletico, that does give me a little bit of hope that maybe there's a little bit more in the fee here, because it might suggest that Atletico was really keen on getting him now as opposed to waiting. And I don't want to get too much into this, but I have always thought that it made sense for someone to try to get him, if not necessarily to get him into camp right away, but to at least be able to bring him in the summer. Always made a lot of sense to me. I think this is a great move. I think that's sort of my takeaway. And again, until we know all the details, it's hard to give a full assessment. But where we sit right now, it looks like the Sounders are going to get some sort of fee. They're going to get some sort of sell on. Oh, their brand is improved. They've shown that they can push a player into La Liga. Obed is with the club that he has dreamed about playing for his essentially most of his soccer playing life. He's going to be playing in La Liga. He has put himself in a strong position to make the World Cup. And then Atletico is getting a nice young player who has real upside. And that's something that we've been saying all along, is the upside that Obed has shown, I think, has sometimes been undervalued, because we don't necessarily see it we don't see him scoring a bunch of goals or picking up a bunch of assists, but he understands the game so well. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he transitions relatively smoothly into a high level. So all in all, it looks pretty good. I guess we may as well spend a little bit of time before we get out of here talking about how the Sounders are going to replace Obed. And I think for the short term, the replacement is already on the roster. It's going to be most likely Hassani Dotson. And if not Hassani Dotson, one of Nikola Pekovic or Snyder Brunel. I actually feel pretty good about the Sounders' depth in central midfield. They don't necessarily have a obvious backup to Christian Roldan, but they didn't really have an obvious backup to Christian Roldan before. So that doesn't really change anything. And I like the talent that they've assembled in that midfield spot. And I don't think losing Obed should be a significant step back for them.
No. And that's credit to the roster build. That's credit to the talent evaluation from a guy like Sean Henderson, to the understanding of getting good deals like Craig Weibold. The Nikola Petrovic move was a low risk, high reward, as we had mentioned. Hassani Dotson, for everything I hear, has looked like a guy that is hard nosed into the ground and has that Brian Smetzer feel to the midfield. Snyder Brunell's a guy that continues to pop up in every single conversation I have with people. And so, there is a lot of ways that, as I've mentioned before, collectively you can replace what Obed Vargas provided. Now, that doesn't mean that ceiling's going to be as high or the potential is going to be as high, but it does give you a very good floor onto how to move on and assess. And that's important, and assess, because by the summer window, now you're going to be able to figure out, look, this is the way this worked out. These are the players that shine, that did not shine. This is what we've thought about, Petrovic so far. This is what we've thought about Hassani so far. And then you can make a decision on whether you need to go out there and replace them, add depth there, or do whatever you want. So I do feel like the Sounders are in a good position to once again hit the floor running, even with Obed Vargas's move, because that was the expectation, right? We said it in the show. We said it in every show. The likelihood that Obed Vargas is with the Sounders at the beginning of the season is low, and that is what it was, right? I mean, and now we're here, and the Sounders knew about it, and they prepared for it.
Absolutely. No, I think that the Sounders did their homework. I think they did a good job of preparing for this possibility. I think the acquisition of Nikola Petrovic when it was made felt a little, potentially redundant, but I think in time it was borne out to be a very smart move. I think the Hassani Dotson move also clearly made a lot of sense in hindsight. And the Snyder Brunell now has the freedom to develop in a much more natural way. Like, they don't need Snyder Brunell to come out and be playing every day. They can let him earn minutes because they have Hassani Dotson, who should be the starter right now. They have Nikola Petrovic, who should be the top option off the bench. And if anything you get out of Snyder Brunell should be a bonus. And I think that's a great position to be in. And, I don't think that the Sounders have any clear, obvious needs right now. I will say that one of the other things is that they don't have, this doesn't do much to free up their flexibility, because Obed occupied a secondary, what do they call it? A secondary roster spot. Why am I blanking on what they actually call those? But he's not on the senior roster.
Right.
And so they can't really replace, they can't go out and sign another senior player. But I don't think that's necessarily a huge problem. I think that they're in a great position right now. I feel very good about what the Sounders have done. Again, even without knowing all the details. And, in time we'll find out really how good of a move this was, but they do have they should have a bunch more flexibility in terms of general allocation money. As long as it was at least $3 million, they'll be able to max that out in terms of what
right. That's important. Yep.
Right. That was sort of a big deal. So, they don't necessarily have a whole bunch of more money, at least as far as we know, to go out and make a big foreign signing. But look, I don't know how likely they were to do that anyway. I mean, that's been the problem, that they haven't been getting the budget to go out and make foreign signings. And, just to kind of harp on an old thing that we've talked about a lot, I don't put that on Craig as much as I put that on ownership's unwillingness to write big checks. And as long as the checks are not being written with big numbers at the end of them, it's going to be tough to make a foreign signing. And that's, in the meantime, this is the kind of business that the Sounders need to be doing. And hopefully those purse strings get loosened a little bit in time.
Yeah, and again, I love the fact that, as we, I think I made it in my first post when the news of Obed Vargas came out, the Sounders had a a list of things that they needed to get out of this deal too, and it sounds like they got everything that they wanted. So that's credit to Craig Weibel, who we criticize when he needs to be criticized, but I think that he's been absolved of any issues that not making this deal by the end of this transfer window would have caused. So credit to him and the organization for also protecting themselves by getting a good sell-on fee, but getting the timings that they wanted, by making sure that their guy was taken care of. So yeah, man, it's a good move. I find it hard for anybody to really question the end product here, the end move. But I think you're right. If that fee or that number comes out and it's not what people believe, that's going to open up to some debate and some criticism. But at the end of the day, I do feel like this was best case scenario for all involved.
Absolutely. Well, let's put a cap in that. I do have to get ready to get out of here and go to Spain, which I'm sure as soon as I get on a plane is when everything will officially break. But in the meantime, thanks for doing this, Niko. I think it was good for us to get on the record here. And the next time I talk to you, it will probably be from Spain. Me and Noah are planning on doing some recording while we're over there. But Niko, you can obviously follow him, El Rolo NW on Blue Sky, Soccer Down Here on YouTube. He was just on Lobbing Scorchers as well. Thanks for doing this. I'm Jeremiah Shan. This is No Sadiete, part of the Sounder Heart Podcast Network, and we'll see you next time.
Let's go, Sounders.